So I invite you to breathe in, breathe out. Although this comes from actual customer data, I haven't been hacked, everything's okay, and nobody's data has been compromised. So you need to acknowledge, though, that feeling that comes just by reading the text, right? So you actually, know that feeling whenever it comes. I'm proposing that we go back, 3 or 4 months before this would happen and actually look at what happens during the first moments of an actual attack. So I had fun and actually put in some Sun Tzu throughout the deck. And basically, to know how your enemy is going to attack, you have to become your enemy. Let's see if we can actually go through that and see how the enemy would actually want to capture our data. First, the threat is evolving. So let's look at what are the economics behind an actual ransomware attack. Money is the obvious answer, but why? Why would they go through all that trouble? Why do they invest in creating malware and the delivery mechanism? We're now looking at things like ransomware as a service. So basically, anybody can go through and actually deploy malware and get their share of that ransom once it gets paid. Anyone with any type of agenda. In the next slide, I've actually taken a few minutes to provide you with a video that was built freakishly early, which is about 7 years ago, by Cisco, but that demonstrate what's known today as extortion economics. We're looking at groups like Lapsus. For those of you that know the group, they no longer invest in developing anything. They just take tools from everybody else, but their specialty is A, they're cloud aware, and B, they're after your data. And they want to know exactly what data to go after so that they can actually ask for most money. So let's flick the video and actually look into this.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. That's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players and learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Katie, are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
Karen in HR, our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Can you call when you get this? Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage.
We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Just pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know
Just
that they'll...
pay it.
Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now.
Okay, it's done.
I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicards is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed
customers.
lower today, led by Qualicart, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
That video was 2016. We're in 2022. So let's look back at what our usual response would be and why it's now becoming a threat to our security. So I must be getting fairly old because I remember the days where your firewall was the cornerstone of your cybersecurity. And it was, if you trust the firewall, nothing will happen. Well, now trends are actually telling us that it's not necessarily going to come from outside, right? Most of the threats now come from inside. And your firewall is just one piece in a larger puzzle. And so you need a unified view. And that's just so you're able to find all the pieces that are happening within your network at the same time when there's an attack. I also remember file security. Anybody here remember what an ACL is? Okay, a few, yeah. Same thing. At some point, you had a file server. If your rights were properly set, only the users that were actually allowed to have the data would. The issue now is that with those malware, the criminals actually act as your user. I saw a video last week that actually said, oh, by the way, you had backups, you had antivirus, you had firewalls. Well, they were logged in as you, so none of that counts anymore. So that's actually where I'm driving at these days. And even password resets. I mean, we used to think that, password resets every 3 months, every 6 months, was a good thing until we saw the actual pervert side of this, which is, well, password got simpler and simpler and simpler and were reused for 5, 10, 20, 30 services. So at one point, your advocation as a password would actually fit the corporate encryption and was used everywhere. So we've seen this, it hurt, but then again, oops, sorry about that. BYOD during pandemic has become, should I say, a threat vector that we didn't see coming either. We didn't see the pandemic coming, and when we tried to resolve the actual work from out of office during confinement, there's all kind of things that happen. I can just name a few from my own customers, and that is, suddenly you had files that were on the network, that were secured on a file server, that were on Dropbox, personal Dropbox. And when you read the master agreements from Dropbox, it basically says that they have the right to share it with the world. And you have things moving from their personal PC to their corporate PC, no security, no nothing, nobody knows about it. It became a nightmare rapidly enough. So what you need to do is actually ask the hard questions when it comes to your company. You have to actually know, Will your company work if it no longer has computers? And I've seen companies, some of them my clients, actually go through this and say, we were in business 100 years before computers. We must be able to make this company go. And we're talking about, fairly big hotels, but suddenly they can't bill for the minibars because everything came through an actual device. They can't know when a customer came in or came out because that's actually in the Oracle database. They can't know if there was parking because that's also in the same database. Every single thing that they were billing before manually suddenly is in a computer. And most companies, sadly enough, do not know where their data lie. They don't know what has value. They don't know, who has access even in some points. So you have data that's being generated. Microsoft says that data doubles every year these days. Where is it? Where is it held? Who has access? Nobody knows. But worst part is, can it kill the company? So basically, if that data is taken out of your system and put into the public, how badly will it hurt your reputation? We saw this with a small company from a place called Valcourt lately, where we actually were able to read online that they released a list of employees that had Pornhub accounts on corporate computers. Nobody wants to see that for their company. I mean, my heart goes to the IT guys over there. I mean, no, please don't. But the worst part is that we've already seen this 5-7 years ago when Ashley Madison, all the lists were out, and then suddenly you had Gov emails in there, you had CGI emails in there, you had bank emails in there. People would use their corporate emails to do personal stuff, and then when it came out, it actually hurt everybody's reputation. And also, if there's a call to the dark web, will you know? I've seen people who had firewall actually remove SSL filtering, removed outgoing scan because, it was slowing down the firewall too much. Well, guess what? If there's a call from inside to the dark web and you're not scanning, you'll never know. Same thing if someone, exfiltrate 30 gigs of data from within your network. Will you know, and will you know where it's going? If you're not scanning for it, you won't know. And where will the attack come from? So there's the obvious 80% email delivery. So if we know that the attack's going to come from email delivery, are you actually protecting your email delivery? Do you have strict rules? Do you have quarantine? Have you put everything in place to make sure that nothing would come in? That'd be step one. Usual suspect, loosely coupled firewall, RDP ports being broadcasted in the open, usual stuff. And then I added teenagers. Who here has teens? Okay. Who here works from home on the same network as their teens? Here's my point. Our teenagers are the best prey. Why? A, because they live online. B, because they don't have a clue about what cybersecurity is. And they actually believe everything they read online. So when my own son, who's now 17, is working on a presentation and has to come to me for troubleshooting because he actually hit the Alt key and doesn't understand what's happening, I'm worried, And so they have a computer, and I've had to actually isolate my own network from their network. The quantity of alerts and errors that I would get from them on a weekly basis, just amazing. But I'm an IT guy. I know how to handle this. If you have a receptionist, an accountant that's working from home on the same network, guess what? They don't know how to handle this. And they won't even know there's an alert. Remember earlier I said know about your data landscape? That's what I mean. Is your data classified? do you have a topographical view of your data? Do you know what it needs to run on? If you lose all your servers and you need to access those data, what do you need to get access to this data? Do you need a SQL server? Do you need an Oracle server? If that's the case, do you need Active Directory? What are the dependencies? Most people don't have that mapped out. And also, it's very nice that you have a backup. Do you need a software to actually restore that backup? And if you don't have physical evidence of it and you say, it's on my PC, but your PC is locked, that's it. You don't have access to those backup anymore. And you'll spend as much time getting the recovery software as restoring the backup. So, another important point is that the entire corporate culture has to evolve. If you ask any employee today, you say, I'm going to put a full-time VPN on your phone. And the first answer will be, no, it's my phone. They have to understand the whys, and they have to understand why you want to manage their device. Why would you want to restrict them from doing anything, especially if they consider that the corporate phone or the corporate computer is their device. So conscience has to evolve. The key is, it's not only within your company, it's with all your providers. So we've seen more and more, third-party providers attack coming in, so we have to be careful about those as well. I recommend to all my customers, create a survival kit. Why? Because the day that it's going to happen to you, you want to be ready. And for that, I do mean, sorry to say this, but basics. Do you have a hard copy of your architecture? Not the Visio document, because if you don't have a computer, or if you don't have the computer on which a Visio is, it's useless. Paper. A roll of paper or an actual document that says, here's the architecture, here's where the data is, here's where other server is, and here's what they're used for. Same thing for a task list. Do you have a recovery task list that basically says, here's the order in which I need to recover things? Here's the actual contact list. Who do I call? Who's managing our firewall? Who's managing our switches? Who's to provide us the 4 terabyte of hardware that we'll need to be able to recover the data? Because if you have a provider that tells you it's going to take 3 weeks for me to get a hard disk, you're in trouble. This needs to be planned ahead. The FBI used to say that 50% of the U.S. companies had been hacked already. The other half just didn't know about it yet. That's reality to me. I mean, everyone is at risk. Therefore, be ready for it. You need access to offline backup as well. I have a story of one of my customer who became my customer because they were attacked. And basically, they had these daily backups that went to AWS. Great ID, great service, worked well. The controller, who's not an IT person, she's a controller, actually decided to save the credentials in Chrome. The day they dropped the payload, they had deleted every single copy of backups the minute before. And you call AWS, say, can I recover this? And they say, well, no, you can't. Because you didn't have this option, So it's great to have backups. You have to make sure you can restore them, and you have to make sure that they're safe from prying eyes. Same thing, something that might sound a bit funny, but I do recommend to my customers to have, or to be ready to deploy, an actual disconnected management network. Because the day you have an attack, you can't plug anything into the network. You basically have to disconnect the firewall to be able, so when consultants come in, when people come in, they need to share data. I mean, we transform usually the largest conference room in a war room, and this is where everything happens. And we basically bring in our own wireless, our own switches, and we create, a parallel network. If you're ready for this, make sure that you have this as part of your kit. And also, make sure you have access to the actual recovery software. And no, I'm not part of the military, don't worry about it. But the reason I'm putting this up is because I have seen companies over and over again try to deploy something as simple as MFA and be faced with resistance from their user. Right? No, we don't want Authenticator on our phone. It's not because it's going to take 30 gig of data onto your smartphone. It's really because it's your phone and you don't want. Fine. The issue is that nobody wants to be accountable, nobody wants to take responsibility, and nobody wants to be disturbed in their way of doing things. We're going back to this culture that has to evolve. But the approach has to be a hard one, because no one in any company wants to be said, by the way, are you ready to not go or go without pay for 6 months if that's the time it takes to recover? And the answer will be no, the day you don't pay me, I'm gone, right? Because it's that kind of economics we're in. We're into a model where, if you don't have a job, you raise a hand, you have another one. So if you actually care for the company you're working for, help us protect it. That's my approach. And everybody has to be in. There can't be this island of people that just say, no, we don't want to be secure, or else the entire company is not secure. So while you're under attack, getting to the eat. Oh, Sun Tzu again. So the greatest victory is the one which requires no battle. The reason I've put this up is because just last week, I was speaking with a customer, and you should have seen their pride when they actually told me that they saw an attack come in. They were able to contain it, and they were able to neutralize it. Where 2 years ago, when we first audited them, they had 8 attacks in the time that we were doing the actual audit. And people were all panicking, and they didn't know, how to react, where to store the data, and so on. So they've made great leap, but that required, this taking conscience. That's the heart of the problem, right? You have 72 minutes to react, an hour and 12 minutes. The issue is that in most companies, it takes 208 days before they know their attack. How much time do you think they need to actually, once they have elevated privileges, to go through your entire network and figure out what's important? From the stats, they have all the time in the world. They have more than 6 months before being discovered. So let's start at time 0. Somebody double clicks a file. Somebody plugs in a USB key they found in the driveway. Anything. Malware gets deployed. So what can save you? Well, if the user can't install or run script, that helps, but it's pretty limiting to a lot of companies. But I know companies such as banks that say, okay, if you plug a USB key, I won't even react unless it's a signed key from the bank. Or, if you double click on a script and you're on a bank PC, it won't even execute unless you're an admin. So that, can really help you. Smart screen, although it's a pain, everybody hates it, I understand, but it would come up and say, this might be malicious code, Are you sure you want to run this? I call this my personal helper that says to the user, are you sure you're doing what's right? And, sometimes they just say, you know what, I'll ask somebody if it's a good idea, which, can save you. Macros are also something, let's say in a Word document in Excel, it's still going around. There's a subset of the company that uses it. Most people could have it disabled and would not know. And that can save you tons of pain as well. And a simple switch on-off, auto run. If you plug in a USB key and it doesn't run, it's a good thing, because that's the easiest way to actually deploy malware. 5 minutes in, well, malware is in memory. Forget it. It's already ready to run, and it's already starting its task sequence of what it wants to do. So either the system is equipped with an EDR, yeah, endpoint detection and response, so that way it will react to this kind of behavior. Some computers, Windows 10, Windows 11, have this option where you can actually have protected memory. Therefore, if someone tries to install something in memory, it's going to block it. Same thing if you have the actual sandboxing that comes in with Windows 10, Windows 11. And, policies, base policies that basically tell you, no, you can't run a VBS or a PowerShell directly from an email. All those policies can actually, help you stop them at that point. 15 minutes down the road. Well, at that point, the malware is becoming resident, which basically means it's now part of your operating system. I've seen malware actually deployed as ldp.exe. For those who don't know, it's the former quote-unquote spooler in Windows that used to run laser printer. It's still in the registry. You can run something lpd.exe. It thinks it's a live process. Guess what? It's malware, and it actually started putting up all of the prerequisite to be able to, basically, you rip it off, it will reinstall itself at that point. What can stop it? EDR still, because EDR will actually scan your system when you try to make something permanent. UEBA, I will come back to that in a minute to actually explain why it helps. But also virtual desktops, because funny enough, virtual desktops, when they have volatile memory, when you reboot, well, nothing you've installed sticked. So basically, everything's just There's also an old option that I haven't put here, which basically deep freeze. Anybody know deep freeze? I use it with my mom. I love it. But basically what it does is that it freezes config, and when you reboot, it's always the same configs that come back up, no matter what virus or anything you've put on, it just freezes the config. So 25 minutes, malware calls home. Can your firewall grab it? It's a fair question, I'm making a call to the dark web from within your network. Will the firewall know? And funny enough, usually those are things that get disabled to fix business issues. So this software can't talk to its manufacturer anymore. We need to remove SSL inspection. Come on, those tools are there to help you, So there needs to be some tighter hold against that. Also, it requires that your firewall supports security feeds and is actually aware of all the block address, all the actual, let's say, bad actors that are out there as websites right now. So, not everybody. We're down to 30 minutes. Please bear with me, 42 to go. At that point, bad actors are actually gaining elevated privileges. So by the time we get out of this phase, they have admin rights within your network, which means, well, this is when all your ACLs just go away, right? They're admin, they act as God, and they can give themselves any credentials that they don't have. You can complicate their life at that point, but you can't really stop them anymore because they'll be admin. So MFA, biometrics, keeping operating system and software up to date. Okay, it's basic, but yeah, it has to happen. Vulnerabilities. I'm going to take a little bit of time on that. For those of you that haven't seen this, the security.microsoft.com portal, when it's actually embedded with Endpoint Manager, gives you, I want to say too much data, but basically it gives you an entire scan of everything that's wrong with your computer and actually tells you how to fix most of them. It is a horrendous amount of work, but once you're done, you actually know that you've fixed every single weaknesses in your PC. This includes things like updating Dell Update, updating Google Chrome, making sure that this key is protected. I mean, everything. So if you have Microsoft 365, you have Endpoint Manager, take a look at it. It's actually a very good way to scan for every vulnerabilities. You can automate the compliance scan as well and fix the known weaknesses, which means go through the actual lists that I just discussed. At that point, they're admin on your network. What do? Well, they install Basecamp. They basically turn around and deploy a command center, which means that they make themselves at home. And they're downloading the latest and greatest toolkit on how to hack a company, basically. Also, at that point, they're creating their own accesses. So they don't actually want to use necessarily your password. And if they have their own, it's even better. The firewall can be a help again, but outgoing has to be scanned, and the dark web has to be blocked. And also, one thing I realized that people might not know, blocking countries in Azure Active Directory. I see you nodding yes. I thought so too, and I did. There is a twist. Conditional accesses in Azure AD actually only applies on stage 2 logging. So basically, when you're doing the MFA. There's 1.8 trillion logins an hour on the first level. So basically, those aren't protected. I know because I had an audit trail run through, and one of my customers had OneDrive ask him every hour to re-log in, and he didn't understand. And it's because Russia was actually pinging him with a password spray on his level 1. And unless you actually disable every base services like POP, IMAP, and so on, basically, they can actually scan until they find your password. And then they can use those services to send email on your behalf. So they don't even need to do like the lady in a video. They can actually turn around and send email as your CEO and just distribute payload, basically. That's it. Next. 45 minutes. So the base is actually being installed. And what that gives is, they can now start to have a list of every single content you have. They can start exfiltrating data. They can actually start, I'll say this, publishing credentials online so that their entire community can access you. And I've seen this when there's an attack and you decide to close the port by which they're coming in. You used to have, we think it's coming from, North Korea. And then suddenly you have attacks from everywhere in the world. You have 100 different source IP hitting your firewall door saying, I want to come in. It's no longer one guy in his basement. They're now, it's called organized crime for a reason. EDR security policies, and if they're unable to gain access to your admin credentials, you've actually stopped them at that point. But the only thing that will bring you insight to be able to see afterward what's happening is an actual SIEM, like Sentinel, for example, and the log collection so that you're able to have history and the actual monitoring, which will give you the alerts to know where it's happening. So now they're validating their access against everything. So they'll validate against your databases, your files, your HR system. They'll just go through everything and basically start collecting everything they can. What's funky at this point is that, you're 1 hour away. So basically, they start this at 1 a.m. At 2 a.m., you're still sleeping, but they're already at the point where they've started doing, let's call it the equivalent of an M&A due diligence. They're going through how much money you're making. They're going through what are your financial statements, how much money is in the bank. They're actually investigating your company at that point. And basically, that's how when they decide to drop the payload, they know exactly when to drop it, and they know exactly how much to ask for ransom. They will not ask you a 4 million ransom if you have 100,000 in the bank. They'll ask 90. But they'll also do is they'll see, under which law which law do you actually respond to? So that they can turn around and say, by the way, according to this law, you're going to pay 2.8 million of fine when we actually release your data. So we'll charge you 2.4. So they're using the law against companies nowadays. At that point, it's been an hour 12. Thank you for your time. They're moving laterally, which means they're just starting to install themselves all over your network. They have a base, they have credentials, and they can just turn around and deploy themselves everywhere. A few things that will stop them is, for example, if you have Windows firewall turned on and you don't trust the computer beside it, which most companies don't like to do because, we're trying to collaborate. But also things like LAPS, for example, which is a Microsoft process that allows you to have a single admin password per computer, and nobody knows them all because they're all generated. That actually helps, limiting how much it can spread. But basically, at that point, all they do is use time to be able to make sure that 100% of UPCs are infected, and nobody knows about it yet. And then 7, 30, 60, 180 days later, once they're ready, they drop the payload. And it all happened within an hour 12. So, how do we fix it? Well, although I love humans, there are jobs for which I believe AI is better. And when you look at a human in a situation of crisis, freeze, flight, fight, not much of this is actually useful, in that type of situation. Now, if you freeze, you don't know what to do, well, they win. If you fly out the window and you're never seen again, they win. And if you fight, some of those will actually tell you, fine, we've just increased the ransom twice because you decided to fight us, and we'll make it even more painful for you. So AI, on the other end, can actually automate response, can actually turn around. Well, they don't sleep. That helps too. But the idea also is that it's pure logic, right? When you write an if statement, there's no sentiment in there. Is it this or is it that? That's it. It's black or white. So to me, that's, there are jobs that are creative and intuitive, that are fun. Trying to stop the malware attack is not what I consider fun. You perhaps, but in my case, I'd say this. At that point, I'd let the AI handle it. That's what I'm saying. So, UEBA, why it matters. There is less than 1% of all the data that's ingested by UEBA that will actually be of importance. So user entity and behavior analytics basically tell you when your users are behaving in a way that's not aligned with their character, basically. We've seen this in one of my customers where I've had to call his staff and say, by the way, did you decide to upload an HD edition of your wedding ceremony online? Because usually you put up 109 megs a week, and last Saturday was 3.8 gig. So, any IDs? And the good news is that he didn't have any IDs, and the good news is that that allowed us to actually stop something because some data was being exfiltrated through Facebook. So I would not have known without the actual Cloud Defender. So those are the type of tools that can actually bring insights when even a user is not aware that something's happening. So, and trust me, there's also a ton of fear when a user gets to know that you're actually analyzing the way they're behaving. Trust me. But it's all done in accordance with privacy. It's all done in accordance with the law. So it's actually done to protect assets of the company. So we have to be, aware and use those technologies. Anybody here knows SOAR? A few? Good. Security orchestration, automation, and response. When I'm talking about AI, this is one of the big things that I'm talking about because those runbooks, those triggers, everything you can do to automate response basically comes and removes that alerts at 2 a.m. Nobody wants that alert at 2 a.m. We want to sleep at 2 a.m. Some of us might not, but, I do. And it improves productivity. It helps. It does not fix a broken culture. It will not fix a boss that goes over security to actually have stuff open. The culture has to be the bed in which this will grow. So I'm offering you a few lessons learned before you have to actually go through the pain. So one last Sun Tzu and then I'm done. So tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So basically, if you're not planning for this, it will eat you alive. And I've seen small companies, big companies, small hotels, big hotels, hotel chains. It doesn't play favorites. If you happen to be one of those 8,000 to which they've sent the email that clicks on it, you're the next winner. So you have to be aware of this. Anybody here believes in best of breed? Any architects in the room? Yeah, put your hands up. I know you do. So why is best of breed an issue right now in IT? Throughout the first 10 years of the 2000, we've said, you look at Gartner, if it's in the upper right corner, you're in business. That's when we had staff. We now have teams that are shrinking on a daily basis that have to know 40, 50, 60 technical stack, and they know about a millimeter of it. They know how to keep it running. They don't know how to secure it. They don't know how to monitor it. Most of monitoring is actually incompatible from one stack to the next. And you end up where knowledge depth is an issue. Your staff doesn't know enough about the software to actually use it to its full potential. So it ends up being unused. There's also the issue of contract management. I won't get into that. If you want to get into that after, I have an hour to lose. I'll be happy to talk about that. But the relationship with the vendor is actually what's problematic. And you can't expect a team of 4 or a team of 10 to go there and manage and know and be able to recover 40, 50 technologies and be great at it. It's like if someone asks you to be a SQL DBA, a firewall engineer, and a creator at the same time for $10 an hour. No one will do it. So we have to start, making those stacks leaner and leaner and leaner. I once did an architecture for a ministry, which I will not name, but basically they had 35 requirements. And I was able to show with Gartner that, for example, Microsoft was in 35 of those leaders. They were not the leader. They were in the leader quadrant. And basically, that meant for the company that their staff could spend 2 months in training and know those stacks by heart. Not 2 years, not 3 years, and not know this much. It's like this deep, and be able to actually understand fully how the stack works. You have to establish recurrent testing. There are ways for staff to receive spear phishing email. I mean, the first time I did this to a customer of mine, the VP of sales, who's a friend, was amongst the first one to click on it. That's okay. He's learned, and basically they have to learn. But the idea is that at some point, within 2, 3, 6 months, they're calling up and saying, I just received this, and I'm not sure that it's actually safe. Can someone look at it? And at that point, half the battle is won, because you actually train your user to start recognize malware, recognize a fake email, recognize what are the differences between a real email and a false one, because they're being great at crafting them now. They even send them through text messaging. They even impersonate VPs now. They have to know. That's important. And basically training, 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 and then testing, and then scoring, and then start over. You know, in the last diapo, something I forgot to say, sorry. Let me just go back for a second. Right now, I'm taking Azure as an example because that's my play field. 1,800 new functionalities a year. No one keeps up with 1% training. So if there are any managers or bosses here that actually have teams, invest in their development. They have to be able to train a lot more than the 1% that's asked for the government. So how do we gap the talent shortage? First, I'm an ex-CGI employee. I recommend against outsourcing. And basically, the reason I'm doing that is because it will create gaps into your security view. So for example, a customer of mine asked me, can I outsource my wireless network, the management of my wireless network? That means that if there's an attack, that spot in your architecture will be blind. You will not be able to see it because they'll keep the logs. They won't actually share the log with you or send them into your SIEM. It will go into their own SIEM and their own defense. And also, you have to start enabling and actually accepting the fact that people work remote now. There are people that want to be digital nomads or actually go offshore and work from somewhere sunny during the winter. And basically, there's also an entire remote immigration model that can actually work also to help you. I was being told that I'm being kind of late, so I apologize. I've got 4 slides left. With your patience, please, sorry. So raise awareness, I was talking about this earlier. Make sure every user is accountable. Bind them by contract. Make sure that they actually read the agreement and sign them. And train your consultant, train your provider before they have access to your data, because afterwards, it's too late. And make sure that your users actually know how to classify data properly. So there is actual proper tags, and you know how to recover them should something happen. An old friend of mine who's a teacher at John Abbott used to tell me, every week, sharpen the saw. So basically, make sure you sharpen your skill. Make sure you take time off. Make sure you're rested, because the day it hits, you won't be able to rest anymore. Those are going to be 18 to 20-hour days, and you'll sleep in the office until it works. So we've lived through that. I hope that you won't have to, but take the time to actually make sure everything is sharp before you go in. You can't ever let your guard down. We were, Cindy Carter, I think, was discussing about the fact that there's a holiday coming in. That's going to be one of the places where they'll want in, and they'll want to be able to actually go through your network. Is the day you go on vacation is the day they'll want to hit. So you have to be extra careful, and you need to have backups. You need to have somebody who can actually take over for you. And time zones are usually fun for that too. For example, I have a team in North Africa. That's 5 more hours to my day that I don't need to have people up in the middle of the night here to fight things. Same thing if you have people in West, 3 hours more, so you can actually extend your normal daytime. And when you start taking security less seriously is actually when they're going to hit you. So just be mindful of that, and keep a zero trust approach in mind. Assume that you've been breached. Make sure that your devices are certified. Make sure that you go with least access privilege. I saw a stat again today. Users use 5% of their actual accesses, which means 95% is in excess. So basically, they have 95% too much access for what they do. And make sure that the devices are compliant before they go in. So that way, you can actually, verify and make sure that they have access to the proper stuff and on corporate devices that are sane. On this, thank you for your time. And you can download the deck with the QR code. One other thing with the QR code, I've left you a little surprise. I've put in a self-assessment tool for your cybersecurity, so you can actually go through with a coffee, and it gives you a score on your various aspects of your security.